I was halfway through flipping burgers on my smoker when I heard the unmistakable sound of heels clacking too fast across gravel. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. "Excuse me, Mr. Nolan Pierce," barked the shrill voice of the HOA president, Karen Whitmore. "You were warned." Again. I sighed, brushing my hands on a rag and turning around. Karen stood at the edge of my gravel drive, arms folded like she was posing for a mugshot. Her blonde bob was stiff as a helmet, and her HOA badge, yes, she had a real badge, glinted in the sun like she was deputized by Satan himself. "I'm grilling on my own land, Karen. You don't have jurisdiction here," Karen scoffed. "This is part of the Maple Ridge HOA. Section E, Paragraph 3 of the Community Guidelines clearly states no open flame cooking after 5 p.m. unless pre-approved by the board." I grinned. "Yeah, see, that's where we disagree." She narrowed her eyes. "Don't play dumb, I've checked the parcel maps." "You might want to check again," I said, flipping a rib without looking. "This land, not part of your little fiefdom, never has been. The last owner opted out before the HOA was formed." "I just finished the paperwork to confirm it." Karen turned bright red. "You think you can outsmart the HOA? You're making the neighborhood look like a tailgate party." "No offense, but I'd rather have a tailgate than a dictatorship," I said, her eyes bulged. "That's it." "I'm calling the sheriff." "Go ahead," I said, walking back to the smoker. "Hope he brings an appetite." She stormed off, high heels digging into the gravel like she was trying to leave scars. 10 minutes later, while I was basting ribs, a cruiser pulled up. Sheriff Dalton stepped out, tipping his hat. "Evening, Nolan. Smells good," he said. "Hope you're hungry," I said, handing him a paper plate. He took it without hesitation. Karen came stomping over from across the street, arms flailing. "Sheriff, this man is in direct violation of HOA code. He's endangering property values. He's got smoke, fire, and loud music." Dalton chewed a rib and nodded slowly. Then he pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Actually, Karen, I looked into this after the last time you called. Mr. Pierce's property isn't under HOA jurisdiction." "Never was. It's outside your boundary line by about 12 feet, Karen blinked. "That's absurd. That can't be right," Dalton shrugged. "County records confirmed it this morning. You don't have any authority here." I handed the sheriff a sweet tea. "You want coleslaw with that?" Karen's face twisted like she bit into a lemon. "This isn't over," she hissed, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "There are rules for a reason." "Sure are," I said, "and I follow mine." "You follow yours on your side of the property line." She turned and stomped back to her house, nearly tripping over her own rage. Sheriff Dalton chuckled. "Mind if I grab a plate for my deputy?" "Take two," I said. "You just saved my brisket from a full-blown HOA intervention." But I knew Karen. She wasn't the type to back down after getting humiliated. This was just the beginning. 2 days passed without a peep from Karen, which should have been a red flag. She didn't vanish, she recalibrated. On Wednesday morning, I was topping off the bird feeder when I noticed a city truck idling near the curb. A lanky man in a neon vest was pacing my front lawn with a clipboard, occasionally glancing at my porch, then scribbling something down. "Can I help you with something?" I called across the yard. He turned, startled. Morning, I'm with Municipal Code Enforcement. Got a complaint about unpermitted structures and non-compliant landscaping." I stared at him. "What structures?" He pointed vaguely. "Said there's a pergola in the backyard that wasn't filed with the planning board. There's also mention of commercial equipment being operated on residential land." I tilted my head. "You mean my smoker?" He glanced down at his clipboard. "Could be. It just says industrial cooking apparatus." "Who filed the complaint?" "Can't disclose that," he said. "Sure," I said, folding my arms, "but you're welcome to take a look. I've got all my permits on file, county, not HOA, since I'm not under their umbrella." He hesitated. "You're not?" "Nope. Property line ends 12 feet past the east fence. Not a square inch of this lot falls under HOA control." He scratched his head. "Then this might be a misfile. We've had a few bogus claims from that neighborhood lately." "Let me guess," I said. "All targeting homes outside the HOA." He gave me a look that said more than he was allowed to say out loud. "If it's all right, I'll just take a few photos for the file. No violations here I can see." I waved him on, and he snapped a few shots before heading back to his truck. As he drove off, I spotted a pair of binoculars peeking through Karen's upstairs window. That night, I pulled out my old trail cams from my deer hunting days and installed them discreetly around the perimeter, one facing the front walkway, another tucked under the eave by the side gate. I didn't trust coincidences, and Karen didn't do subtle. By Friday, the footage confirmed what I suspected. At exactly 2:47 a.m., a figure in a dark hoodie crept onto my driveway and dumped a black trash bag near my garage. I watched the video in slow motion. The person looked around, pulled something from the bag, and smeared it along my garage door. Then they tossed the bag behind the hydrangeas and bolted. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. The garbage bag was still there. Inside, raw chicken guts, a shattered glass bottle, and a handful of used latex gloves. The garage door had a thick smear of something brownish red. From the smell, I guessed it was spoiled meat juice mixed with paint thinner. I called the sheriff. Deputy Langston arrived within 20 minutes, a younger guy with a quiet, focused way about him. I showed him the footage, the bag, and the garage door. He whistled low. "That's criminal mischief and illegal dumping, possibly hazardous waste disposal depending on what's in the bag. Can you run the footage through facial recognition?" He nodded. "We'll process it. If they left prints on the bottle or gloves, we might get a match." On Sunday, Langston returned. This time, he wasn't alone. He brought someone from the county prosecutor's office. "Mr. Pierce," she said, introducing herself as Ada Mallory Wexler. "I've reviewed the footage and evidence. The gloves had partial prints. They match a woman named Denise Whitmore, Karen's daughter," Langston added. "She's been cited before for trespassing and vandalism in another district. Charges were dropped when her mother paid restitution." Wexler continued, "This time it's different. The act was premeditated and captured on camera. We're filing charges." By Tuesday morning, word had spread. Karen's perfect lawn decorations started disappearing overnight. Neighbors quietly removing the HOA issued flags and signs from their yards. Her authority was unraveling. But she didn't go quietly. That afternoon, a glossy flyer appeared on every doorstep claiming I was operating an illegal catering business from my home. It used a photo of me grilling, probably taken from across the street, and accused me of creating a public nuisance and violating municipal health codes. I brought the flyer straight to Wexler. "She's escalating," I said. Wexler frowned. "This borders on defamation. She's distributing false information with intent to damage your reputation." Langston chimed in. "We'll need to talk to her, and if she refuses, we'll subpoena her for a deposition." They visited Karen that evening. I watched from my porch as she stood in her doorway, arms crossed, trying to wave them off. Langston handed her a folder. Her face went pale. She shut the door without another word. Later that night, I got a knock at my door. It was my neighbor Tom, retired Navy vet, lived 2 houses down. He held up the flyer. "She crossed a line with this," he said. "I've lived here 15 years. Never seen anyone go after a neighbor like that." "I'm not the only one she's targeted," I said. He nodded. "I know. She tried to fine me last year for having a flagpole she didn't approve. I checked the bylaws. Nothing says I need her permission." "What you do?" "I kept the flagpole, and now I'm helping you." Tom wasn't alone. Over the next few days, neighbors started coming forward. An older couple revealed she'd threatened to tow their car for not parking neatly. A single mom said Karen tried to block her home daycare license by claiming she was operating a business. We held a quiet meeting at Tom's house. 17 people showed up, all with stories. One woman, Joyce, had a folder of letters Karen had sent over the past year, each more aggressive than the last. Another neighbor had audio recordings of Karen threatening to make life unbearable for anyone who questioned her. We all agreed on one thing: Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a liability. That week, We filed a petition with the county to hold a formal hearing on the HOA's conduct. Since Karen had used HOA funds to print and distribute the defamatory flyers, and possibly to pay her daughter's legal bills, we had grounds to challenge her presidency. The county board scheduled a hearing for the following month. Meanwhile, Wexler moved forward with charges against Denise Whitmore and began reviewing allegations of financial misappropriation by Karen. The HOA's treasurer, who hadn't spoken up until now, handed over receipts showing Karen had reimbursed herself nearly $2,000 for board-related expenses with no documentation. By the end of the week, Karen's control was unraveling faster than she could react. Her allies on the board were either backing away or offering to cooperate with the county investigation, and I hadn't even cleaned the smear off my garage door yet. I figured I'd leave it there a little longer. A reminder of how far she was willing to go and how far we were willing to push back. The day of the county hearing arrived under a gray sky, the kind that made everything look washed out and grim. It fit the mood perfectly. I'd shaved, put on my best flannel shirt that didn't smell like mesquite, and brought a binder of sworn statements, time-stamped footage, and municipal maps that made it impossible to deny what had been going on. The hearing was held at the town's community center, in a stuffy room paneled with fake wood and lined with fold-out chairs. By the time I walked in, at least 30 people were already seated: neighbors, county officials, and a handful of local reporters who smelled a scandal. Karen sat at the front of the room, flanked by two of her dwindling board members. Her jaw was clenched tight, lips pressed in a thin line, and she was wearing a navy suit that looked like it had never seen dirt. Across from her sat Assistant District Attorney Wexler, flipping through a manila folder with calm precision. The county commissioner called the meeting to order, and Karen's voice was the first to cut through the silence. This is nothing more than a smear campaign orchestrated by a homeowner who has made it his personal vendetta to destroy this community's standards. Wexler didn't even look up. The complaint was filed by multiple residents. Each provided documented examples of rule manipulation, misuse of HOA funds, and targeted harassment. "Would you like me to read them aloud?" Karen's board allies shifted uncomfortably. The commissioner gestured to me. "Mr. Pierce, since you initiated part of this action, please begin." I opened my binder and laid out the facts, a timeline of events, aerial maps showing property lines, footage of the vandalism, the forged flyer. Receipts showing HOA funds spent on personal expenses listed as community image maintenance. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth did the heavy lifting. When I finished, the room was silent except for the rustling of pages as one of the county clerks flipped through the evidence. Then Wexler stood. "We've also discovered that the HOA's treasurer, at Miss Whitmore's direction, approved a series of payments to a private security company, payments disguised as landscaping expenses. However, no landscaping was performed. The company in question doesn't exist in the state registry." One of the board members turned pale. "That's absurd," Karen said quickly, her voice rising an octave. "We hired temporary help to enforce neighborhood compliance. We were protecting property values." Wexler didn't even blink. "By wiring funds to a shell company registered in Nevada that shares a mailing address with your daughter's university apartment." That shut her up. The commissioner leaned forward. "This is no longer a simple dispute over jurisdiction or HOA overreach. These are serious allegations." Then, as if fate had a flair for timing, the door opened and Sheriff Dalton entered with Deputy Langston. Both looked grim. Dalton nodded toward the commissioners. "We've concluded the investigation into the vandalism incident at Mr. Pierce's residence." Karen straightened her spine. "I've already told you, I had no involvement in that." Dalton ignored her and pulled a folder from under his arm. "We've confirmed that the gloves used in the act contained DNA from Miss Whitmore's daughter. Further, 2 text messages were recovered from her phone. One of them reads, and I quote, "He wants to act like he's outside the HOA. Let's see how he likes garbage on his door. It was sent from your number, Miss Whitmore." Karen's hand twitched. Langston added, "We also found surveillance footage showing you entering your daughter's car the night the incident occurred, carrying the same black bag found at Mr. Pierce's residence." The commissioner looked exhausted. "Miss Whitmore, you're hereby suspended from your position pending a full audit. Further legal action will be determined by the district attorney's office." Karen stood so suddenly her chair screeched backward. "This is a setup, all of it. You're letting a backyard cookout destroy years of community order." A man in the back, one of the neighbors she'd tried to fine over mailbox paint, laughed once, sharp and bitter. No one shushed him. "I have done more for this neighborhood than anyone here," Karen said, pointing around the room. "And you're all too blind to see it." Wexler stepped forward. "This hearing is not about your legacy, it's about accountability and transparency." The room buzzed with murmurs. The commissioner called for a recess. Outside, under the overhang while rain started to spit on the sidewalk, I leaned against the wall and watched as Karen paced in circles under the awning, talking into her phone. Her voice was low, frantic. She didn't notice me until she turned sharply and nearly bumped into my elbow. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You've made enemies." I looked at her like she was a stranger who wandered into the wrong town. "You didn't lose because of me, Karen. You lost because you thought you were above the rules you forced on everyone else." She opened her mouth, but a black SUV pulled up and honked. She stormed off toward it without another word. The next morning, I woke to find a handwritten note slid under my door. It was from the HOA's former treasurer, Margaret, the one who'd handed over the receipts. It read, "Thank you for doing what the rest of us were too scared to. I'm resigning, but I'm also testifying in the criminal case. It's overdue." Later that week, 2 more board members resigned. The HOA was left with no functioning leadership. The county appointed a temporary mediator to oversee operations until a full election could be held with third-party oversight. At the next neighborhood meeting, held at the local library instead of Karen's house, attendance doubled. For the first time in years, residents were allowed to speak without being cut off. A vote passed unanimously to amend the bylaws to include a recall clause 1 that would allow residents to remove any board member by majority vote without waiting for term limits. Sheriff Dalton dropped by near the end of the meeting, not as an officer, but as a neighbor. He lived 2 blocks over and had been quietly watching things unfold. He brought a tray of barbecue sliders from a local joint and passed them around like communion. As people mingled and shared grievances, I stood near the back with Tom and Joyce, sipping iced tea and watching something that hadn't existed here before: trust. Tom nudged me. "You planning to run for the board?" I shook my head. "I'm planning to smoke ribs next weekend and keep my driveway clear of chicken guts," Joyce laughed. "That's a pity. You'd win in a landslide." "I like being the guy with the camera and a binder," I said. "Let someone else wear the badge." By the end of the month, Karen was formally indicted for misuse of community funds, conspiracy to commit vandalism, and obstruction of a county investigation. Her daughter was charged separately and took a plea deal that included mandated community service, ironically assigned to landscaping maintenance around the very homes she tried to sabotage. No one saw Karen at the sentencing. Rumor was she'd moved in with a cousin 2 counties over while awaiting trial. The house she'd lorded over like a castle went dark, the shutters drawn tight like it was trying to hide from its own history. But the neighborhood didn't shrink from it. A group of residents painted over the HOA-issued signs and installed a community message board on the corner instead. The first message read, "Grill out, speak up, we're watching out for each other now," and we meant it. The first warm Saturday after the hearing, I was in the shed organizing tools when Tom showed up with a clipboard and a grin that had trouble staying on one side of his face. "You're not going to believe what the county just posted," he said, handing me a printed notice. They've scheduled the HOA's financial audit for Tuesday, open to public view. They're bringing in an independent forensic accountant. This is going to be thorough. I wiped my hands on an old towel and read the paper. It was legitimate. The county seal was embossed in the corner, and the auditor's name was one I recognized from a few housing oversight reports. She had a reputation for digging deep and not caring how many rocks she had to flip in the process. "Looks like they're not dragging their feet," I said. Tom adjusted his cap. "They're treating this like a real financial crime, and between you and me, Margaret dropped off another envelope last night. She found old emails that show Karen was moving HOA money through a shell maintenance firm for nearly 2 years. Looks like she started before your smoker even hit the ground." That made me pause. "Before the BBQ nonsense, way before, this wasn't about your grill," Tom said, lowering his voice. "You were just the first person with enough backbone to say no to her." I set the clipboard on the workbench. "Then I guess Tuesday's gonna be a long day." It was. By 9 o'clock that morning, the municipal building's main hall was filled with residents, county officials, and a few reporters who'd caught wind of the larger implications. One of them told me off the record that this might be the start of a wider investigation into HOA boards abusing financial power across the state. Apparently, Karen's little empire wasn't as unique as we'd thought. The auditor, a sharp-eyed woman named Celia Grant, began with a concise statement. "What you're about to see isn't speculation. These are numbers pulled directly from the HOA's accounts, bank transfers, and vendor receipts. We've verified the data with the county's treasurer's office and flagged all transactions that appear to violate nonprofit financial law." She clicked a remote, and a projector lit up the wall with a spreadsheet, row after row of HOA expenses. At first, it looked like typical maintenance fees and landscaping costs, but then she zoomed in. Notice the vendor listed here. Greenline Grounds Management paid over $30,000 in a single fiscal year. No physical address. Registered agent links back to a P.O. box in Reno. "No tax filings, no employee records," the room murmured. Now cross-reference that with another set of payments made to Civic Image Solutions. Same P.O. box, same routing number. That's another $19,000. Descriptions say community beautification and neighborhood security enhancements. Tom leaned toward me. "That's code for whatever Karen wanted," Grant continued. "We traced the bank account receiving those funds. It belongs to a trust in the name of Denise Whitmore. That's a direct family connection to the sitting HOA president at the time." The air in the room thinned. "Total misappropriated funds across 3 years, $57,412, that we can prove. There may be more hidden through cash withdrawals and personal reimbursements, but this alone is enough for felony fraud under state law." The county prosecutor stood and addressed the room. "We will be filing formal charges against Karen Whitmore for embezzlement, wire fraud, and abuse of fiduciary duty. The district court has already approved a warrant for her arrest." Grant added, "We've also suspended the Maple Ridge HOA's ability to collect dues until a new board is elected under oversight. Any liens filed by the previous board will be reviewed and, if necessary, voided." People clapped. Some cried. I just sat still, letting it wash over me. By the time the meeting ended, word was already spreading online. A local news outlet published a full breakdown of the audit with annotated documents. Within hours, residents from nearby neighborhoods began sharing their own HOA horror stories, emboldened by the takedown. That afternoon, Wexler called me directly. She's in custody. Picked her up at her sister's place in West Arlington. She tried to claim she didn't know anything about the shell accounts, but we've got emails, voicemails, even a wire transfer she authorized herself. I stood on my back porch, overlooking the yard where this all began. What's she facing? Minimum of 5 years. Could be more depending on how the judge interprets the wire fraud counts. She's already trying to cut a deal, but we're not giving her much room. I thanked her. She didn't need to call me, but she did, maybe because she knew how personal it had become for all of us. That evening, the neighborhood held an impromptu block party. No official reason, no speeches. Just folks bringing over folding chairs, lemonade, and the kind of quiet joy that comes from knowing something ugly has finally been pulled out at the root. Joyce brought a cake shaped like a gavel. It was terrible, but we ate it anyway. Tom showed up with a small speaker playing old blues records and grilled sausages wrapped in butcher paper. Every few minutes, someone would walk over to thank me. I nodded, shook hands, and waved them off with a smile. When the sun dipped low, a group of kids started playing tag near Karen's empty house. The windows were still shuttered, the lawn overgrown. No one bothered to stop them. Later that week, the county mailed out ballots for the interim HOA board. I didn't run, but I endorsed Joyce and Tom. They both won by a landslide. At the first official meeting, Joyce opened with something simple. No more secret fines, no more fear. We're neighbors, not prisoners. The room applauded. As for me, I went back to what I always intended to do: take care of my land, mind my business, and light my smoker without worrying about someone documenting the smoke plume like it was a crime scene. One morning, a month after the arrest, a letter arrived from the state attorney's office. They'd launched a task force focused on HOA oversight and invited me to consult as a community representative. I agreed. Not because I liked meetings, but because I knew there were people out there like Karen, still hiding behind bylaws and badges. If I could help stop even one of them before they started wrecking lives, it was worth it. And on the first anniversary of the hearing, I hosted the biggest barbecue Maple Ridge had ever seen. No speeches, no drama. Just ribs, laughter, and the smell of mesquite drifting over a neighborhood finally learning how to breathe again.